Chairperson of one of our associations, Bob Stone. We have Vanessa from one of our associations as well, and a few other individuals from the broad CIFSA family. The signing of this important agreement is a culmination of 4 months of intensive talks, first within the Metals and Engineering Industries Bargaining Council, wherein we worked closely with all the other employer parties, and subsequently in our direct engagements with our respective labor partners who are sitting here with me today. The process was long and hard, and there were considerable challenges along the way. We were able to reach an historic agreement on realistic wage adjustments for the next 3 years. It was not easy. Neither we nor the unions are entirely happy with the agreement reached, but we can live with it. We believe that it is fair to both parties. The details are, we agreed on a 7% increase for the 2017-18 financial year, a 6.75% increase for the 2018-19 financial year, and a 6.5% increase for the 2019-20 financial year. As you know, we came into these negotiations with vastly different starting points, as is usually the case during such negotiations. However, to the credit of the respective parties, we moved gradually over time to the realistic figures at which we eventually settled. We did so very mindful of the realistic figures, of the terrible states rather, of our economy, and more importantly of the worst state of the metals and engineering sector, which has been bleeding jobs over the past few years. As partners, we are painfully aware of the enormous damage wreaked on our sector by cheap, often subsidized imports from China and other Asian countries. We are acutely aware of the tens of thousands of jobs that have been lost and which continue to be lost in the sector since the run-up to South Africa's 2010 FIFA World Cup, when the country was a massive construction site. We are mindful of the need for our sector to improve productivity levels and to be more competitive both domestically and internationally. A few minutes ago, I described this agreement as historic. I did so because for the first time in a decade, we were able to reach a settlement agreement without any industrial action. We experienced, as you know, a week-long strike in 2007, a 2-week-long strike in 2011, and a month-long strike in 2014. As we sign this settlement agreement this morning, I have to set the record straight by responding to some of the vitriolic anti-CIFSA propaganda that has been spread with gay abandon by UASA CEO Gerard Papenfuss, whose organization last signed a settlement agreement in 2007, which happened to be rolled over for another year in 2010. UASA claims, for instance, that CIFSA represents only 13% of employers in the sector, that this is an agreement between CIFSA and Numsa, and that we represent only big companies. Regrettably, ladies and gentlemen, these are blatant lies by a man who knows only too well that they are lies, and yet he continues to spout them. The truth, for your information, is as follows. 1, we have 23 independent employer associations that are members of CIFSA. 21 of them are party to the MEIBC, the bargaining council responsible for our sector. Collectively, companies that are members of these associations employ around 170,000 people who constitute by far the majority of employees on the bargaining council. Only one of the 21 member associations registered with the MEIBC is not party to this agreement. Secondly, while we acknowledge Numsa as the largest union in the sector, we have good relations with all 5 unions. And contrary to UASA's propaganda, this is an agreement between CIFSA's 20 member associations and all 5 trade unions, which are party to the MEIBC. Finally, members of our various associations include both small, medium, and large companies, with a vast majority of them, 66%, being small companies employing fewer than 50 people. You may wonder then why Gerard Papenfuss persists in telling these blatant lies. I cannot but wonder also. I don't want to speculate about his motives. Unlike our detractors, CIFSA and its members believe that labor is an important, indispensable partner and not an enemy. We believe that it is fundamentally important for employers and labor to forge a strong relationship based on mutual respect, to be able to engage meaningfully on what needs to be done to improve the welfare of the sector. We believe that the two stakeholder groups need to strive for win-win solutions at all times, because there is, in our view, no business without labor, and there are no employees without employers. We acknowledge that we do not always and will not always agree on everything, but we at CIFSA pledge to have any differences that may exist between us discussed constructively in an ongoing effort to ensure that we understand each other's positions and hopefully eventually get to see things in the same light. Therefore, we recommit ourselves to working closely with our labor partners to lobby the government for policies that will enable business to thrive in order to create jobs and to make the country an attractive investment destination. We are deeply troubled by the way in which our beautiful country is led at the moment, and by the corruption which has become so endemic. We call on the government, and we hope that our labor partners will join us in this call, to establish speedily a commission of inquiry into the rampant state capture allegations, to offer ethical leadership, and to ensure greater policy coordination within its ranks in order to eliminate the embarrassing situation which often sees cabinet ministers publicly championing often contradictory, market-unfriendly policies. South Africa, in our view, desperately needs leadership from our political leaders and a strong partnership involving the government, business, and labor if it is to realize its full potential. I would like to thank our labor partners for the very constructive manner in which we have engaged during these negotiations. We believe that it is vitally important that we continue to work together to resolve all outstanding matters, and more importantly, to ensure the continued survival of this institution, the embattled MEIBC. I am privileged to sign this morning the 2017-2020 settlement agreement on behalf of 20 of our member associations, whose members collectively employ the vast majority of employees in this bargaining council. I'll be signing the agreement on behalf of our member companies of different sizes, small, medium, and large. Finally, I'd like to thank the CIFSA negotiating team, which was so ably led by my colleague, Operations Director Lucio Trentini, and was made up of representatives from our member associations who are here this morning. Program directors, thank you so much for the opportunity.
Thank you, Mr. Nyatsumba, for those remarks. I think that the fact that this round of negotiations was completed without a strike action is no small feat, especially if one looks at if one thinks about the destructive, or the destructive strikes that we had in 2014, which were very, very harmful to the sector and to the economy at large. Before we started, we should have introduced the parties that are going to sign this agreement. In my immediate left, we've got Mr. Johan van Niekerk from UASA.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Then we have Mr. Ivan Jim, the General Secretary of Numsa.
Good morning, everybody.
And then we have Mr. Kaiser Nyatsomba, the CEO of CIFSA.
I already said good morning.
After him, we have Mr. Vice Ngonyama, the Acting General Secretary of the MEIBC.
Morning, everyone.
Morning.
We have Mr. Marius Krokamp of Solidarity.
Good morning, everybody.
Morning. And we have Mr. Moses Tulo of Sawia.
Sanbonan.
I'll request the gentleman from UASA too, because I saw your name being changed. It's Edward Tomechane.
Yeah, thank you. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen.
Now I'm going to hand over to my co-program director, Pagamile.
Thank you so much to my other co-program director. I would like to, before I introduce the General Secretary of the National Union of Metalworkers of South Africa, I want to take a moment just to sort of reflect on some of the things that Mr. Kaiser Nyatsumba mentioned. I was present and I observed some of the talks that took place in this room in the engineering wage talks that took place earlier this year. And what Mr. Nyatsumba says is absolutely true. Really, it is quite a feat that we have managed to avoid a strike. If you consider the very extreme positions that the parties had adopted at the beginning of these talks. The one thing that we are very thankful for as a trade union, and I think it's very important that I mention this, is that we have extremely militant members in this organization. And I feel it's very prudent for me to take this opportunity just to give a special mention to the Numsa negotiating team for all of their hard work, their dedication, and their efforts. These comrades literally did not sleep for days on end, analyzing, scrutinizing line by line every single proposal which had been placed on the table, debating and fighting and arguing any principle which was going to result in a down variation of basic conditions and in the erosion of our members' rights. And the members of this negotiating team not only proved the militancy of this trade union, but also reinforced the idea that we are a union that cares about our members, that cares about their rights, but more importantly, that we care about truly tackling inequality in a real sense. We want to talk about tackling inequality in this country, you do it in wage talks. The only way we're going to deal with the crippling crisis of poverty, unemployment, and inequality is if you're going to pay people fairly. And that is why the whole concept of a bargaining council or negotiated settlements is an important thing. Because especially if it's going to work in the interests of workers and the poor in mind. So I just thought it was very important that I make that mention of the hard work that was put in by our members. And with that, I would like to introduce the General Secretary of this trade union, the National Union of Metalworkers, the National Union of Metalworkers of South Africa, Mr. Ivan Jim. If you can please give him a round of applause. Thank you.
Well, I think, good morning, everybody. I'll probably have got few things to say. The first one, it is wrong that we're settling without a strike. But I guess it is a very good precedent. We are demonstrating that when we approach any negotiations, we do it from a very clear mindset that it is give and take. And secondly, you will not settle any negotiations unless parties are prepared to move from their positions. As a union, this has been a very difficult path for the past 5 months. We have to be dynamic and realistic, but our starting point has been to defend the interests of our members. We know that since we signed the previous agreement, in many medium, small-sized companies, our members have experienced brutality and hostility from a fairly strange grouping of employers in the industry. Employers who will not appreciate the fact that in South Africa, the levels of poverty, unemployment, and inequality are extremely bad and they are worsening. And that one person who's got a job support 5 to 6 extended families. And that when it is time after 3-year agreement to improve wages for workers, that's not a small matter. And we understand the state of the economy currently, that we're in a junk status, we're technically in a recession. As a union, we took all this into account and we took a very firm stance that we will not accept that our members, that their wages must be cut. Secondly, that they will not get an increase. We could have demanded family as Numsa at 10%, but very clearly we also had to take the interest of collective bargaining. This is not just a settlement for wages, but also it's about to defend collective bargaining. And those big employers who know that they should have given 10%, we're going to follow them in the factories. We'll find ways and means of making sure that you must improve because workers know that you can improve. But basically we took this decision of compromising and accept 7%, which must be backdated to the 1st of July. And any employer who attempt and delay, this does not need to wait for the minister. Those companies that they know that they must backdate because we have signed the agreement, they must backdate wages from the 1st of July. And we will work with the government, Department of Labor in particular, to make sure that this agreement is extended to all non-parties. And we have a very simple message to those employers who are deliberately want to frustrate this round of negotiation, frustrated this round of negotiations, who are not on board. Kaiser says there are about 23 associations. About 20 associations are not signing. No, the other way around. I'm saying one is not signing. Numsa is going to follow that association. They must know that from now onwards, once we sign, they must come and sign this agreement. Secondly, those 1, 2, 3 companies would think that they are going to continue to mislead themselves by what we, in our view, I mean, this drive for cutting workers' wages, which is about super exploitation, unfortunately, it reminds Numsa and its workers the racist past, where black people, Africans in particular, are seen for nothing but to be super exploited. This is what UASA, in our view, with Pap and Fuse are championing. And to be honest, they remind us of the old Boer-de-Bond kind of an attitude. And this country is going to move forward. We will stop at nothing in making sure that the workers receive a living wage. And if anybody doubts us, people must not implement this agreement. We're going to follow companies plant by plant, yard by yard, to make sure that what is secured by workers in this agreement is extended to all employers. And therefore, there should be stability in the industry. And employers who will cause strike, as we're negotiating with plastic, which is playing hide and seek, they must know that we're signing the agreement today, and we've decided to compromise not to take a strike. And the warning is that they must provoke Numsa at their free will. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Jim. Now it will be the turn of Mr. Krowkamp, who will be followed by Mr. Van Niekerk from their respective unions. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Isn't it great to see a full house in this room? Last time we had a full house in this room, there was no agreement at all. And that was part of the negotiations. And from that process, the parties that you see here today are the parties who are in agreement. But there are companies out there, there are associations out there who are not here. And that's our biggest concern. They do represent quite a big proportion of this industry. And I want to start off with appealing to those organizations to please come on board. We are still open to talk to you, but we need to get everybody on board to take this industry forward. It's no secret the economic realities this industry is facing. It's a microcosm of what's happening in South Africa. Has been alluded, it's challenged by economic challenges, imports and so on, high costs. And we need to take everything forward as parties to try and save our steel industry. The Bargaining Council is a critical part of that. It's the pillars of collective bargaining. It should be retained, it should be saved. It's currently under administration, and correctly so, to try and preserve that for our members, for the workers out there, and for those who follow after us. But we are glad to be able to sign this agreement this morning. We want to thank CIFSA and our colleague, fellow unions for that. It's been very difficult. I think we settled on a compromise, really, not the ideal that we would have wanted, but we are adult enough to make sure that we act in the best interest of this industry and our members and the workers. Going forward, we still have a process that follows from this agreement, where we want to extend this agreement to non-parties. That is very critical for the existence and survival of our bargaining council in the metal industries, and we'll be fully engaging to do that. So I think it's a momentous occasion. Yes, we didn't have a strike this year. We're happy about that, but it does not mean that we will let down the guard. We as trade unions and as Solidarity will be there always for our members and the workers, and we will also fight to protect this institution as far as we can. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Krokamp. I'd now like to invite Mr. Van Niekerk of UASA, please, to make his remarks.
Thank you very much. I was glad to be part of this occasion, and that we could reach a reasonable agreement, especially in the economic environment we are currently in. We were mandated by our members, and our members understand the economic challenges, and therefore they were prepared to lower their mandate, to accept the agreement and without any need for industrial action. We wish that all employers could be part of this agreement. However, we appreciate the important initiative of CIFSA. We believe that this agreement will motivate our members to add even more value than they are currently doing. We want to again emphasize that our members in UASA will never accept a down variation of hard-earned benefits or salaries. We hope that we will be successful together to enforce this agreement to all non-parties of the Council as soon as possible, and that all employees in our sector could benefit from this agreement. Lastly, we also want to confirm that as a major and an important player in this sector, we appreciate the efforts of all parties who made this agreement possible, and we will sign the agreement on behalf of all UASA members. Thanks.
Thank you very much, sir. I'd also like to invite Mr. Tobejane of UASA, please, just to make his remarks. Thank you.
Yeah, good morning. Thanks very much, Program Director. I think it is very important, especially from the employer side, that starting from today, mainly CIFSA employers organizations, that I think you have learned something as of today. I think the approach of a bloc employers going forward, we believe that it's no longer going to work. Because of that particular bloc, you can see where we are today. The other part of the bloc decided to move away. And we regard that as part of the game. I think we've seen that from here, you'll go back to your council and come up with a proper decision in future. Secondly, I think the first day when we were meeting in this room, UASA have made it clear to Pap and Fus that, look, if you are going to come up with this kind of approach, as you did previously, we strongly believe that no, that kind of approach from your side is not going to work, because of we cannot afford a situation whereby you want to take us back where we come from with your attitude and undermining the collective bargaining. We cannot allow that to happen anymore. And where is Pap and Fus today? He's not here, because he's got his own agenda. And I think all of us who are sitting here, we know that his agenda is to collapse this council, something that you cannot afford, all of us who are sitting here. it's our responsibility as parties who are going to sign an agreement today to make sure that we defeat the enemy in this council. We defeat the enemy in this industry, the enemy that wants to collapse this council. And as I said, that's something that we cannot afford. We are also pleading to CIFSA to talk to their colleagues who are not going to sign this agreement, to come to the party so that we move forward as a block of trade unions and as a block of employers' organizations from CIFSA, leading by CIFSA. I think that will be our interest as MEUSA and other trade unions who are party to this agreement that we're going to sign today. And going forward, we believe that the administrator and the acting General Secretary to this council will assist this body to continue existing. So that when we reconvene again after 3 years, we can also try to touch us areas that we did not touch because of the current situation that we are facing economically. So as a result of the current administration of President Zuma, I think we all know that we are signing this agreement, the nature of this agreement of today because of the current situation that we are facing, because of the current administration of President Zuma. That is not taking us anywhere. We are not here for politics, but I think all of us, we know where we are today. I mean, everybody knows Comrade. Comrade Fusi knows very well. But I always remind you see President Zuma now. Where is he taking us from? But that's for the discussion for another day. Thanks very much for the parties and looking forward to sign the agreement and all the best.
Thank you, Mr. Tobejan. Finally, I'd like to invite Mr. Tobe to make his remarks.
I had started by thanking you and greeting you. I preferred it in Zulu, Sanbonan Futhi. My first take here is to talk to Sipho Maisela. I'm actually the backstage boy. He just decided to promote me to come here, and I'm seeing the glitters and it scares the hell out of me. I would thank him for the support. I would thank the office for the support they gave to arrive at this stage. But it would be an injustice not to talk about Comrade Vusi. This comrade has shown us what we call the patriotic front. And it is my honest appeal to all the unions that we must have this kind of a thing. And I would also extend it to Lucia. I don't see him here. He's decided to run away. Thank you once more to Lucia also. But this is a good story because there's no death in it. It's not a tragic story. So I do feel that whoever is trying to work us down when we negotiate, because we really had a near collapse of this cancer. And it is these people, the gratitude and honor should go to these people that are sitting here. These are the guys that made sure that we have such a kind of a thing. And persistence to say, no, we cannot go on strike. It could be very much unreasonable to go on strike. But going forward, we're saying, it does not take away the right to go on strike. But we looked at the circumstances and we thought, in the best interest of the workers, let's go and accept what is actually not an ideal agreement. But we'll live with it, we'll defend it. And this is where we should be starting. I want to thank each and every union that is here. I want to thank CIFSA for making it possible for us to have this agreement. And I'm saying, if we can go, the parties that are here, you can go forward and go and make sure that this gets gazetted, so that central bargaining is, guaranteed and protected by us. If we don't protect central bargaining, we are in for a hell of a time here. So I once more want to thank each and every one, each and every organization that may put to this effort that we're having. Thank you.
One of the things that Kaiser raised, which is a very important issue, which we will push very hard moving beyond this agreement, is the question of jobs. The industry is bleeding. We have been losing jobs. And it's unlike we don't know what needs to be done. Obviously, you're asking about WTO. South Africa became the darling of Davos, became the darling of the world. We were the first one to liberalize trade. We remove exchange control. Obviously, if you liberalize trade, you allow dumping of production, which is not manufactured in this country, to destroy jobs in the country. And we remove exchange control. We allowed money. We desperately needed to be invested in productive sectors of the economy to create jobs. And what Numsa has been doing has been to engage particular employers in each and every sector, and we engage government. We are now will be calling for a job summit very soon that we must sit down as parties. Obviously, job summit are very ceremonial. There must be a dialogue between CIFSA, Numsa, and all trade unions that are here to say, how do we save the industry? We know what needs to be done. We need to increase tariffs. We need to ensure that we take anti-dumping measures where there is dumping. We need to bring back capital controls. We need to demand that interest rate must be cut. We need to champion manufacturing and industrialization. Numsa has not been mincing his words about the importance. If you take steel, for instance, our view is that you need to nationalize the steel industry and the value chain so that your input costs are actually made available cheap to downstream industry. I mean, we've got a situation where in this country we have lost our competitive advantage when it comes to electricity because our ESCOM coal mines and all our SOEs are entangled in corruption, in cronyism. We are making a call that all the boards of SOEs must be reconstituted, business, labor, civil society, trade unions, and government must be part of those boards so that we can ensure that procurement basically champion manufacturing and industrialization so that we can deal with the scourge of poverty, unemployment, and inequalities.
Mr. Krokan from Solidarity.
If I can just add in terms of the WTO, they determined bound rates by the agreement. The government has introduced tariffs and safeguards recently on certain steel products to protect the industry and role players within the industry. I think those platforms within the WTO are very important for the government and for South Africa to be able to introduce measures which protect the industry and obviously in the end protect jobs, because we were at the brink, or still at the brink, of losing our primary steel producing industry with Highveld gone and Mittal under severe pressure. Those measures should assist in the interim, but our long-term concern still remains, and I think the WTO plays an important role with the panels and steel panels where government and labour is represented.
Okay, if I could just add to that, I think firstly the WTO is a reality of life. It plays around globally a very important role in terms of regulating global trade. But before I deal directly with it, let me just say I think we as a country made a mistake, and many in government will accept that, they admit to that. We moved in 1994 from a situation where our economy, a former colleague of mine used to use the words double glazing. Our economy was protected. We're not part of the international trade of international world. We had the various tariffs in place to protect local manufacturing, the local business, which was not integrated into the global economy. We moved from that situation to one where instead of gradually moving to liberalize our economy, to reduce over time the various tariffs, they went overnight. Overnight they were no longer there. And so we exposed the South African business to international competition overnight at a time when it was not ready for that. And so essentially we ended up with a situation where there was an influx of various products, including in our sector, into the local market, and local producers could not compete. there has since been recognition of the fact that that does need to be to be rectified. Now, there's not a single world, to my knowledge, in the world that does not protect sectors that it considers to be strategic. And so tariffs are legitimate. And it took a while for us, working as a partnership, at the instance of one of our labor partners, Numsa, to come together and to say to government, there's a great degree of vulnerability. We need to make sure that we do everything possible to put in place the necessary protections while ensuring that those on the downstream who are affected are equally protected. And so, as Marius has indicated, there are the boundaries within the World Trade Organization. You can put up tariffs up to the particular level that the World Trade Organization will agree with, and you cannot do more than that. And so, where there is room for us continually to protect our sector and other sectors of the economy, we need as a country to avail ourselves of the opportunities to protect ourselves accordingly. But much, much more importantly, we need as a country to improve our levels of productivity and of competitiveness. We need to be much more competitive domestically and internationally, and that will take a whole series of discussions, among other things, among ourselves as business, as employers, and as labor, including with government too.
Thank you. Anyone else with a question before we wrap up this round?
Coming from Sayewa.
And what are the issues that you face as a steelworker in your union?
So there is a lot because people are complaining with the treatment in the working place. The rates, the money that they are earning is not insufficient. They can't even be a living wage.
Is there racism in employment? Are your members discriminated against as a result of being Africans?
Yeah, in some of the companies there is discrimination. Our members are discriminated a lot. But we as the union are trying by all means to fight against discrimination, as it is our duty and our role to make sure that we fight for our members.
Yourself and talk about issues that you're facing.
I'm Vusum Zimabo. I'm a Numsa sector coordinator, the main negotiator when it comes to the engineering sector.
And you have a new agreement here. What are the pressures from international imports into South Africa that has affected the steel industry here in South Africa?
Truly speaking, that's what have caused us to reach an agreement which is not necessarily favorable to either party, because we know the influx of imports from other countries, cheap and low quality things, which to us they are just dumping. But we had to protect our industry by entering in a sustainable agreement that will be able to give the industry a breathing space in going forward.
And what is the role of Chinese imports in South Africa?
Chinese, they are the worst of all these. We don't know, and we don't know how did South Africa get to this BRICS arrangement, because we think it was premature to get to BRICS arrangement prior having our country being on par with the main players.
And I understand that China is bringing in workers, importing workers for their projects in South Africa, not hiring African workers. Is that the case?
Yes, I can tell you and give you a practical example. If you go to a town in Lichtenburg, which is in Free State, they have about 1,300 Chinese that they brought in to come and erect a firm that should have been erected by South Africans. We have got riggers, we have got all people that can work in the construction industry to build, but they brought Chinese. They come with their food, their rice, everything. What is their value in South Africa in a true sense? It means they've just come to kill our industries.
Well, they say it's Chinese, it's socialism with Chinese characteristics. It sounds like for South Africans, their influence has been to hurt the South African working class.
No, I don't think so. As much as workers, we don't want borders between workers, but I don't think that the approach that the Chinese are doing is correct. To me, it's supposed to be, workers need to be equal across the world, because if you look at even these Chinese that are brought in, are being worse exploited than even South Africans. The companies from China are the worst exploiters. Now, they can't claim to be socialist whilst they're doing the worst part to even these very same workers from China.
Now, are these Chinese workers who are working in South Africa covered by South African labor laws and labor protection?
No, they are not, but they are supposed to be. They are not, because first of all, they build big walls around the companies where they are working. At times, you might not know until when you go for inspection in that company through the bargaining council agents to know that there are expatriates. We call it expatriates and foreigners, But Chinese are the worst exploiters to me when it comes to employment conditions of
And your infrastructure here, like the United States, is falling apart. Bridges are collapsing, the bridges from the airport to Johannesburg. I mean, why hasn't there been a mass infrastructure development in South Africa that would put steel workers and the massive number of unemployed to work in South Africa?
There can be a huge and very much what I can term infrastructure development in South Africa if government was prepared to do so. But look at the ruling party. It's in disarray itself. Now, how will it be able to even advance in that line in making sure that it creates employment? It should have had lessons learned from 2010 when we had a World Cup in South Africa, the development they did for specific places. Now, if they should have expanded that to other places, it should have been better.